thanks to everybody who has joined our webinar today. We keep going our marathon of webinars, which are expected to be out for every single day during the next couple of months. We're doing some sort of an experiment. And today we have a pretty interesting topic, which is about team, product, and customers. So those are the parts of the triangle that we are always trying to leverage and that we're always looking at. And it is important to understand how can you improve the relationships between your solution, your engineer, your managers, and the most important thing, with your clients as well, because this is something without what the whole process just cannot happen. And if it is not happening, then you're probably doing something wrong. Anyway, before we get started, let me introduce myself. Probably you have heard me and you have seen me at the previous webinar, but anyway, my name is Bogdan. I'm the marketing wizard and project manager at the INSART company. I've been working as a software developer for a pretty long period of time. After that, I have switched to the product management and the marketing. And for me, this is the aspect where I am finding myself as the most suitable member of the process, because I understand that I can bring some value, helping customers implement new features into their fintech products, into their fintech projects, etc. Anyway, you are currently on the channel of the INSART company, and for almost 30 years, we're providing the services of transforming the financial companies into the fintech unicorns. And if you have any project you'd like us to help you with the development team, with our software development expertise, feel free to reach us out at insart/contact us. I will leave the link in the description. But anyway, let's talk a little bit more about your product and how all the components should work together. So, first of all, your product's quality and success depend much on how your teams interact. And it doesn't really matter what those teams are, whether those are the team of the customer support specialist, or maybe the team of the product managers, or maybe the engineering team. Misunderstandings and conflicts are frequent when the paths cross for the, for example, product team and for the engineers, because those are the managers and those are the developers, and they have different understanding of how things are going. And in this case, poor team structure and organization technically can spoil things further. And soon you may see that everyone's pointing fingers at each other, and instead of getting things done, they are just trying to do some self-blaming. So to build bridges between different teams, their members and their management as well will need to review their behavior in a pretty complicated, hard way. So here today we'll talk about how to marry the product and engineers and managers together so they can coexist happily ever after. And the first thing I'd like to start with is some myths about product managers and engineers. As a person who is pretty related to the product management, I want to say that every single point that I'm going to be talking about right now is pretty crucial for me as well, because I've been experiencing that in my own way. And before you can build a good relationship between your product and your engineering team, you have to find out what is creating the friction in the first place, what they think it's going to be. While differences can certainly contribute, sometimes there can be some sort of the misconceptions, and they get in the way of building a productive and mutually respectful relationship, which becomes a pretty complicated and a pretty important thing that makes lots of problems. And in this case, product managers, they often have a reputation of time wasting meeting schedulers, paperwork sponsors, some sort of chaos creators. And I have heard that a lot about myself for a lot of times, to be honest. But obviously, that's the myth, and I don't like hearing some things. But anyway, that's how we sometimes appear in the eyes of the engineering team, for example. So sometimes this is really true, let's be honest. And sometimes all of us are meeting schedulers who do some nonsense meetings which do not cost anything. But a stereotypical engineer just usually wants to do their job, and they do not give a real bug about the product team's vision. They have a ticket in Jira, they want to have it completed. They do not really care why do we do some things like that. And this is pretty fine. But at the same time, there is the misconception that happens, and this is why we get this main point of friction when we cannot make the teams work collaboratively. So this also close to routine in some instances, and still when adopted without a thorough judgment, Those are some misconceptions and detrimental to cross-team collaboration, and those are the main problems. And they can affect your product health and competitiveness. And any objections, any ideas start worth nothing when your product loses its cost. And this is the most important part to think about. Anyway, there's such thing that's called the love languages of product managers. And technically, those are the methodics. If you're a product manager, if you're the team lead, if you're the CTO, you need to know that as the managerial representative, that engineers want to hear such things as storytelling, because such things evoke emotions and they facilitate some personal involvement. They want you to tell some stories. Of course, do not transform that into like a long-term storytelling where it takes an hour of your meeting and it costs expensively a lot. But at the same time, the stories evoke emotions and facilitate personal involvement, as I've said. And you need to let your team feel like they are heroes. Moreover, you don't need to tell stories, but you need to let your team tell their stories. Let them tell how were they weekend. Let them tell how did they do during some process of preparing for the new release. Let them tell what bothers them. This is the most important part in this whole process. Another thing, it's pretty related, but still the other one, it's support. You have to create a safe environment where everyone can feel confident and to feel that they are growing. Otherwise, the things will not work in the correct way. So make sure that you are building the environment where people can understand that they can grow and they have a chance to grow as well. Especially, this is pretty greatly introducible for the generation of Zoomers. Those are the people who have the clip thinking. Like, those are the guys who are used to the TikTok videos, to short reels on YouTube, to small posts on Instagram, etc. They are changing their attention all the time. And pretty soon, these people will start filling in our offices as the new employees. And that's pretty awesome. But at the same time, those are the ones who are striving to change this all the time because they just cannot exist in a situation when there is something permanent. They just cannot live in such a way. And that's where you need to show the environment that they can understand, they can grow, they can feel confident, and they can be sure in their next day, understanding that the better they work, the better they do. Another thing is about team bonding. So you have to organize some quality time together where work makes space for friendship. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of the conception where your team is your family, as for example, the Netflix provides. Because technically, in the end of the working day, you will end up with your own family, with your own problems. And we all go to work, first of all, to earn money. Let's be honest. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you have to separate from your team and to keep them at their distance, just because technically this is your collaborators and those are the people whom you will be speaking more than your wife and your kids for a long period of time until you work on that project. So let's face it, we have to make the most out of that situation. So you have to find the ways to organize this quality time. You have to find the ways to make some space for friendship. That's not bad. And this is just how the things work. And this is how the human being is being identified. So it's not a bad thing. Anyway, moving forward, those are just the examples of how, as the manager, you can make sure that your team works and develops correctly. But also, it is always about collaboration. It is not about one-person game when you, as the manager, have to cultivate some things. You have to make sure that everything works, etc. No, it is about the collaboration. And here are some ways how to cultivate it. So respect should flow both ways, as I've already said. And it takes usually not just respect itself, it takes understanding, it takes communication, attention, responsibility to facilitate the exchange. Those are important things. And also there is something else each side should contribute to as well, and they have to pay attention to that. First of all, a product manager is the human touch point between the product and the engineering teams. Probably you already know that, and there is nothing new from that you can find out. But anyway, project managers are in charge, as well as the product managers, are in charge of laying the basis for cooperation. They are the ones responsible for that, and all the other ones are just the players who have to submit it. Simple example. In the sport alternative, product manager is the quarterback. And he identifies how the game will be played in the next phase. He identifies who's going to get the ball. He identifies that maybe sometimes he needs to run to the touchdown zone by himself, and that's possible as well. But this is what product manager identifies, and this cannot be built until the trust is persistent inside the team. If you don't have enough trust, you will not be able to reach even such things as those. So make sure that trust is something you're developing. Another thing, and one of the best ways to do, is to turn the explanation of the product vision into some sort of kind of initiation. Product managers should let engineers feel that they are the part of something. They are not just telling how the thing works, but they let them think on their own, like, okay, why is it working so? What can I do to make it work so? And they have to feel themselves as a part of something meaningful, that their opinions and feedback are valued and important. And until this happens, you cannot pretend to be a good manager just because you are not giving your team something they need to have. At the same time, as the next move, it is great to include the engineering team in the roadmap planning. You can just try do this in the middle of the project, why not? But you have to give them this opportunity. You have to show that product management means, and you need to know what they say, and it's important for you. And engineers should become personally involved in creating the product before they even write the first string of code. Because until they understand how the things are working and why are they working in that way, it will not be working in any way, let's face it. So your product manager will also ensure that everyone is in sync on the project only after everybody will understand why the things work in that way and what is the purpose of making the things work that way. And the only way to reach that thing is to make sure that everybody in your project team will be able to deliver the results and to contribute into the results of that. Until then, it is impossible to have something. Finally, product managers should ensure a clear definition of the roles and responsibilities of all the teams. And it is pretty important to double check if everyone knows their scope of responsibility to make sure that you are just avoiding the conflicts. Otherwise, somebody will be doing the same job as somebody else. And this will transform into the conflict. But the main reason would be that somebody has tried to make some initiative, and at the same time, the other ones had to do the same thing, but they did not know their roles correctly. And this will end up with the people don't want to provide any initiative at all in the future. And this quite important problem that team will not be able to show that they are initiative enough. And engineers still should stay proactive as well and voice their opinion. And they have to have a chance to be heard in case they want to be heard. Obviously, if the engineer is about just making some things, writing some code, and he doesn't want to participate, this is the type of the person. That's not too bad, but it's just the type of the person. You cannot do anything with that. But first of all, let engineers know that they can provide their own deadlines and explain them. They are not the ones who just have to stick to your one's deadlines. They have to be able to adapt to the things you provide. And the product team and engineers can reach a consensus by discussing the expected deadline from both sides. Like, okay, I'm a product manager. I want to make business. I want to make business stuff. And I need this feature to be delivered before the conference that will take place in March. But I need to hear the opinion of my engineer because he may be sidetracked with the other problems, or he might have a predecessor task that takes too much time. Or maybe it is just impossible to have this task done by March. And in any way, I'll be pushing that this will end up with the manager, with the engineer doing his job, just in a way to get rid of it. And that's a serious problem, and we don't want this to happen. So make sure that your engineers are staying heard. And if you're an engineer, make sure that you express your opinion correctly. At the same time, even better option is to implement some schedules or release plans with a detailed picture of your product's evolution timeline. And this picture has to be developed together. You need to work on that all at once and all together. Engineers should feel free to spell out the possible trade-offs, and they need to feel free to explain how to approach them better as well. Otherwise, they will not be able to do anything in this case because they will just have the roadmap written on the wall. They will do not participate in that, and they will have no idea how it's gonna get to that time point. But at the same time, if they were the ones participating in the process, they will understand how this is gonna happen and why is it going to happen. And they understand they are responsible for that as well because they have suggested such a timeline. And it is no pushy way. There is no like a serious problem in that. This is just a way of making sure that people are doing their job correctly. Finally, you should promote using visuals to explain ideas or to provide suggestions, etc., across all the teams. Because usually the visual representation, it helps engineers to make technical ideas accessible to others. And let's face the truth, like obviously there are different types of people. Some of people are visuals, some of them are audios, some of them are kinestheticals, and some of them are mixed ones. And these people get an understanding of different things in different ways. Visuals take all the input from the external world via the visual representation things, like via their eyes, for example. At the same time, audibles ones are hearing everything around them. Kinesthetics ones, they are touching everything. They need to feel the structure of something, even if it's something abstract. And mixed ones, they are usually combining these approaches. But let's face the truth, that visuals are 70% of people who are currently in the world, and we need to aim at these forward targets, because until you have a visual to explain your idea, you will just be seeing some verbal things that not everybody will understand. Just a simple example, you know this great game, which is called the broken phone, when there's some people sitting in a row, and the first one tells something to the ear of the next one, and the next one does the same to the next one, and in the end, we get completely different phrase. That's the same thing here. You will tell something, the person will understand it differently, it will pass it differently to the other department, and that's going to be the problem. Make sure your ideas, your tasks, your explanations are stick to some specific task line. This is quite important. And obviously, the soft skills matter, not just as the way to impress the client, for example, but also as the way of establishing the connections inside your team as well. Anyway, moving forward, it's also about strengthening your product at the team level. And obviously, this is something we're talking about for this whole webinar. But anyway, this is the thing I would like to pay special attention to. Because we've been talking with some of our specialists and with our engineers and senior engineers to share some advices of nipping the product problems in the bud in the engineering team. Like, how can you share the problem? How can you make sure that the problem is being delivered directly? And here are some tips that we have created. They will help you organize the teamwork, and possibly you can reuse some of those. So, first of all, engineers should log everything linked to the critical parts of the application, especially regarding the payments, the financial calculations, data sent to external users, clients, etc. We work in such a thing as the Fintech. Fintech is always about finances. Finances is always about something we never want to lose. People hate losing their money. And when something crucial happens to the functionality and makes people lose their money, it's horrible. This is where we lose. And of course, it's not permitted to log any sensitive data like credit card numbers or values. But when, for example, you're working on payment operations, your team needs to log the information in case an issue pops up. For example, what was the amount of transaction? What has happened? When this transaction happened? For instance, payment gateway. It would not receive your request, but that payment was marked as a completed on your side. Or let's say you have an external payment gateway, and it says the payment was made, but your application doesn't see that. The user has paid the money, but he never gets a response that it was paid. That's a serious problem. And when something like this happens, first of all, you need to deal with frustration from the payer, from the customer. And that's another topic. But at the same time, engineers need to have a chance to open some logs and to analyze what has happened. What was the problem? Why did it happen at all? And that's another important thing to pay attention at. Also, you need lots of different tests. And that's about making your product better. And that's about strengthening your product from the engineering level. Unit tests, integration tests, business logic, calculations, any test you can assume, not just the smoke or heavy pass testing. But your developer might make minor changes, like it's possible. They make even the smallest code change. But the Murphy law is about something and something bad happening all at once and at the same time. And even this minor change can break everything and break some fundamental logic. And you will get it too late, like when this happenings on production, and you will see that this is wrong and this is not going as expected. But anyway, this is something you will not be able to get rid of. So testing will help to stop the snowball before it smashes into production and before your customer will start complaining, because otherwise this is the main problem you can ever face. Another thing is that you need to ensure everyone is signed up for updates, because, and again, we are working in finances and we need to make sure that we are fine with everything we do. And your team should keep up with the changes in the third-party services integrated. Maybe something was integrated into your app, maybe something got a malware in the previous library version. Make sure that this was updated in time. And for example, external services, they tend to change their APIs. And these adjustments can break your app integration. So make sure that you are up to date and that you are doing the migrations on time. Sometimes the changes can be a surprise. And even if you're all caught up with the subscriptions, you should keep monitoring for API changes with fail notifications or even without any help. And it will help you play it safe, because otherwise you will face the problem when the integration will get broken. You again will get a huge wave of customers who will not be happy about what's going on. And this is another problem that you need to face. So just make sure that you are doing that. Another thing you need to pay attention at is document everything, because the code, and that's pretty relatable to the things that we've been talking about, the managers, but still, the code's most important parts should have comments describing its logic. And it's super helpful to maintain documentation using your personal wiki. Maybe you have the Confluence, maybe you have the Notion, maybe you have Jira as a separate ticket system. But you can also get with the simplest option, just a list of documents on Google Drive or in OneDrive or any other service. Make sure you have everything documented, everything you have done so far. Next, everyone on your team must have someone to ensure them. Because in other words, never let your app depend on a specific one person. Because if that person is ill or is on vacation or if anything bad is happening, someone else should be able to solve these issues. And even without using the existing documents and descriptions and without any problems, you do not need to go to that person, because this will create a serious bottleneck and you'll get in trouble in that moment. And by the way, this is one more reason to keep your app documentation in order too. Next one is your project should have a senior level developers or at least one architect who knows that the project structure, because technically there should be someone who can review the code of the other developers, who can ensure that the application structure is correct. And if one of the developers lacks those experience, you can face a bunch of different kinds of problems. Like you can find out the data from the database that it somehow appeared on the web, it got leaked just because it was not secured properly. So make sure that your engineering team is senior enough. And it might sound pretty obvious, but this is something you really need to do to make sure you're doing. Anyway, moving forward, there is still a thing about the product managers we need to pay attention to, and the engineers, because the truth about engineers from the other side, we have already spoken about the product managers, but about the engineers, they care about what the product is and they want to build it best. It's not just about simple coding. That can be a simple coding for the junior developer, but most of them are pretty initiative as well. And it is a huge myth that they are not interested in the product. Make sure that you give them a possibility to give their opinion. Developers can be social. Developers worry about the big picture. They are worrying about what's going to happen next. They are really thinking about it. But the problem is that your communication way cannot be established the correct way, and you just may not be getting the info from them in the right way as needed. That's the problem. Finally, do include your developers in strategy and in planning, because they love thinking beyond implementation. They need this possibility. They need a chance to think on how the things work before they start implementing. Otherwise, this will be just a huge snowball that will not be functioning the correct way. And that's going to end up in a serious problem. Make sure you're making your engineers understanding the strategy of planning. That's another thing to mention. Finally, how to make sure that the team is the right one. There is always a possibility to hire somebody who's wrong and to hire somebody who is not working in the way that you need. But how to make sure that you are doing it the correct way? First of all, when hiring new specialists, you can assemble them one by one. cherry picking the candidates, like picking the best ones one by one. Yes, it's going to be a long process. Sometimes it's hard, but at the same time, you'll get a hell of a crazy company team that will allow you to do incredible things. And while it can help with ensuring skill quality, you will still have to deal with the natural selection of the adaptation period. It's pretty hard to adapt into the company. It's true. It takes some time. So will your team like the new developers? Will they fit into the cultural structure? Will they like your team as well? Because that's another thing. When you're a new employee, you're always taking a look at the company as well, because that's the one-to-one process, not about just company deciding whether you are right fit or not. And there is no guarantee you can find good enough professionals and make them stay. That's another thing to mention. Another way is to find an already closely knit team that will share your mission, vision, and values. Look for your team in the department. Look for your team in your company. Try to find the people who will be sharing your visions, and that's going to help you a lot. So these people can become your long-term tech partner as well, and far from easy as well, but there is one option you can check for compatibility. So you can just try to make sure that you are dealing correctly with the team you have. Make sure that you have the right cultural fit. Make sure that you are providing them enough place to share their opinions. Make sure they have enough time and possibilities to share their thoughts as well. And this is where you will be able to get to the success point. On such a positive note, I would like to end up this webinar. So we have taken a look at different aspects at a pretty interesting component of providing the details from the product managers on how the product managers think. At the same time, we have the idea of how the engineering team works. And combining these two aspects together, you can build a really strong product as well. So make sure you do that. And always do not forget that if you're just in the process of building or finding the right outsourcing or staffing team, we are here to help. We have an awesome solution development teams at INSART that were built and cherry-picked candidate by candidate by us. And we're pretty happy to provide you the solution development team to do the development for you. So if you don't want to waste your time building your team from scratch, making this cherry picking, just let these to be done by professionals, by us, and we're happy to help you. Anyway, I really appreciate you joining this webinar today. I really appreciate if you have watching it in the recording as well. Thanks a lot for that. And I hope that this was useful to you. Stay healthy, take care, and I see you pretty soon.